Hello everyone, it's Baka Tenchi here for Tora Anime and Kawaii Senpai. So currently we've got a community project going on where we are working on an animation project when some of our newer animators have little experience with this. So this is just an overview video on the principles of animation and the background to animation, so it's a more understandable and they can understand their job better. So what animation basically is the collection of images which are put together to create a moving image, if that makes any sense. So like it can become a video file by drawing an amount of images together and making subtle changes in them so they almost become lifelike. So I'll pull up an example real quick of what one of this is. So first off, what we need is keyframes, and what these keyframes are is they are like this. So keyframes are the first frames that are used in animating. So these are just basically the overview of the full animation. So during the time, so say every 5 seconds there is a keyframe made, but it's not done within a time-wise order, it's done in a movement order. So the time that she uses to move her hand to flick her hair to the time that she turns around to look at the camera, that sort of thing, that's all this information here is related to actual movements and how long this cut actually takes. But that's okay, because we won't be worrying about that. We're actually talking about the in-between work of these keyframes. So this here is a keyframe, well, keyframes that are put together, and they are automatically put into this GIF format for us today, so we can see how once keyframes are done, how it appears to look like afterwards. So if I bring up another example, this is also a keyframe. This is just one image. It appears I didn't download that correctly apparently. So this here is a full keyframe project. Oh, open that twice. So we're looking here. This is the keyframe here. So the movement of the major details that we need to incorporate into the animation. So as we can see, the first frame is her being surprised, and she starts crying, and then she starts yelling in shock. So that's the keyframes. So after we have those frames, what needs to happen next is the in-between. So what happens is in between these frames here is that gets drawn again. So it gets drawn again as called an in-between frame, and these in-between frames make those keyframes look smoother and appear more smooth. And once that's done, so once we have the in-between from the keyframes, then we go to the next stage, which is the background and the cleaning of the animation, the coloring and the shading, so the effects. So this is basically what the final product looks like after the in-between work. So most of our animators right now are focusing on the in-between or the keyframes. And this is at a later stage of our project where we will be looking at the coloring and composition of the animation. So now basically how do you animate in a more in-depth point of view is, alright, I'll get you an example. So this program here is Clip Studio Paint X. There's two versions of this. This is the more expensive version, but you can also do it in Photoshop. Photoshop also, the new update of Photoshop has a animation function, and you can export as a GIF. So if we go new file, and I'll choose my animation. This is just for the example of animating using Clip Studio Paint. You don't need to use this program to animate. You can use whatever program you like. So this is the timeline palette. So this will be how I'll make my keyframes and how I make my in-between work. So first of all, a very basic exercise for animating is the bouncing ball, which is used a lot in education facilities to teach how to animate. So if we take a look at our page here, so basically what I want is I want to get a ball that bounces from this side have it bounce off this wall and come back and bounce, and maybe stop around here of some sort. So basically what we first need to do now is we need to make the keyframes. So basically the head animation staff here at our project will be doing this. We'll be sorting out the keyframes for you, and you just do the in-between work. But so basically what we want to do is we'll have the ball, and we'll make our second keyframe. We'll say about maybe, it's not, and we'll go create new cell over here, new cell. So that's basically made me a new cell. If I turn on onion skin, onion skin is the preview of between the frames, so you can see the differences of the frames before and after, so you know how to, well, not really after your frame, but this will show you the before frames, so you know how to animate to make it look smooth. So we have the ball here. I want to do my second keyframe, so I want the ball to be about here, and then we'll go make another. Oh, that's actually quite, no, let's not do that one. That'll be too rough. So maybe we'll have it a bit more over here, and then the in between should be much more crisp and smoother looking. So that's one. That's our first keyframe. This is our second keyframe. Now we'll make our third keyframe over here. Right, make it about here. And now we'll make our fourth keyframe. If it will cooperate, there we go. Fourth keyframe. So now this is where we'll have the bounce. Now I'll draw it a bit flat here to give it the effect of having to look at, like, the effect of it actually hitting the surface of the floor here, imaginary floor. So what we have now is something that looks like this. Now that is basically what we have so far. So we'll go ahead and make another keyframe. Now we want the ball to bounce back up towards this way, so we'll put that here. We'll make another keyframe. And another one. This might take a little bit, so I'll just probably skip time for you to make this nice and quick tutorial. Alright, now that we've basically done our keyframes, we can see, if we go back to the start here, and we'll press play, and you can see the movement of the ball in a keyframe version. So that's quite a short example. So that's as you can see, that's really rough to how it should look. So that's the keyframes. It's the basic idea of how our animation should be looking. So that gives us the overview of what it's going to look like. Now, what we need to do is we need to make the frames in between these keyframes, and it'll look a lot smoother rather than just teleporting around the page. So to do this, I'll have my first keyframe, and I'll have my second keyframe here. Now I want to make a frame in between these two frames. That's why it's called the in-between frame. So this is my first frame, this is my second frame. For the in-between frame, I need to draw in between the two frames to make them connect up. So once that's done, it should be a lot smoother. Whoops, I didn't do that right. Let me just undo that real quick. So I need to make a new frame. We're in section 2. There we go. And this is the in-between frame here. 2. So now this is the second frame, and you can see the frame of the third frame. So we need to draw one in between number 2 and 3 as well. This one here, this is, so the more frames you have in between the in between frames, sorry, is the smoother the animation will look. So it'll look a lot more refined and a lot more smooth. Basically, it speeds up the frames per second that you can see, so the animation look a lot better. If you wanted to make a slow motion parts of the animation, you need to use a lot more frames. So a lot more frames will look a lot better as slow motion, and have them move over a longer period of time, and that's how you get the slow motion effect. But for this is a fast moving effect, so we'll have not as we can skip. You don't have, depending on the situation, you don't have to have that many frames. It saves a lot of work and saves a lot of time. So there we go. Saves a lot of work, saves a lot of time, and a lot of effort. So that's in the end of making a project. That's pretty important. But it's just a shortcut, really. So as you can see, since the ball is moving quite quickly, I don't need to make that many frames to make it give it the effect of a slow motion or a smooth movement, because it's moving quite quickly. So naturally the ball will sort of appear to move very fast with less frames. There we go, this is the last in between, and this ball should finally be out of the scene. So just inside this box here is the scene. Everything on the outside gets chopped off in production, so after production, sorry, post-production. This is just basically where you can scribble and do pre-scene, pre-cut sort of work, or have your color palette or whatnot. So basically we've done all the frames now. We'll go back to the first frame, and we can see the movement of the ball. Now see how that looks a lot smoother compared to what we had before. So there we go. So that's basically the principle to animation. We have our keyframes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these are 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, which are in-betweens. Some in-betweens can have more than one frame, because if it's quite a large scene, for example, keyframes might not be as many keyframes, so it might be, you might have to use your own imagination there and draw as per the keyframe, because that's just normal in anime production, because it saves time. But that's for more skilled staff, so you're having trouble with that, you can ask me any questions on our Discord, and I'll see if I can put in some more keyframes for you or something. So that's basically the principles of animation. If you've got any more questions, please do throw it in the Discord, and I'll make another video or something explaining it. No worries.